Welcome back, everyone. Have you ever felt like you're just kind of losing your grip on who you are? Well, today we're diving into an explainer that is going to completely flip how we understand memory, purpose, and even our connection to each other. We're looking at a relational philosophy, meaning as a doing. And let me tell you, it takes everything you thought you knew about your own identity and turns it totally on its head. Let's get right into it.
So think about it. We usually treat truth like it's some sort of hidden treasure, right? Something we have to hunt down, possess, and fiercely protect. We treat our identities and our life's purpose almost like physical objects we can just hold in our hands. But what if that entire assumption is completely backwards? Seriously, what if meaning isn't a noun you find, but a verb, something you actively do?
There's this beautiful little parable about a monastery that houses an ancient sacred book. One night, a young monk is just absolutely terrified because the original paper of the book crumbled to dust generations ago. He's thinking, oh no, the truth is lost forever. It's just a copy of a copy. But then, the abbot shows him an old scribe working tirelessly in the dark. He explains to the young monk, the paper was never the book. The true book was the nightly, evolving act of copying it. It's done by someone who is constantly changing and growing. The truth survived precisely because it was an action. It's a doing.
And that brings us to this idea of the possession framework. This is something we really need to unlearn. It's basically this anxiety-driven belief that our meaning, our memories, and our identities are just static objects waiting to be found and guarded against loss. I mean, think about how tightly we all cling to our own past. The real problem with treating your identity like a precious object is that it makes you incredibly brittle. You become terrified of change, literally terrified of losing this thing you're trying so hard to guard.
Part 1, the illusion of keeping. We're going to dismantle the filing cabinet lie. Let's see how this philosophy actually collides with modern neuroscience to shift our whole understanding of the human mind, especially how we hold on to the past.
You see, we often buy into this filing cabinet lie. That's the belief that you store a memory perfectly unchanged in your brain, like a dusty file in some mental DMV. You just pull it open and boom, there it is. But the neuroscientific reality is something called memory reconsolidation. What this means is that every single time you recall a memory, your brain actually destabilizes it. You pull it up, you alter it with whatever grief, joy, or context you're feeling today, and then you resave it. You literally never access an original memory. You're actively performing and resaving it based on exactly who you are right now.
Now, at first, that might sound kind of like a tragedy, right? Like, wait, I can't perfectly keep my past? But honestly, this neurological decay is a massive mercy. Think about it. If our memories were rigid stone, perfectly preserved without any alteration, we'd be permanently trapped in our past traumas. We could never forgive, we could never ever heal. We don't just keep our memories. We re-keep a vow to them, updating them constantly so we can actually survive and move forward.
Moving into Part 2, the jazz of purpose and how meaning survives loss. We're going to explore how this superfluid, changing nature of memory is exactly what allows our sense of purpose to survive when we face truly devastating losses.
Picture this. Imagine two travelers, both carrying lamps for their sons. The first man, he carves his reason into solid stone. I walk for my son. And he lashes his lamp right to it. This is the tablet Y. It's rigid, and it feels incredibly secure. But when word comes that his son has died, that stone shatters, his lamp goes out, and he's just left in the dark. The second man, though, he operates what we call the Jazz Y. It's adaptable. He relights his lamp every single morning, stating his purpose in words that fit the reality of that specific dawn.
Just notice how his purpose improvises when life totally amputates its original object. When the second man's son dies, his flame doesn't just extinguish, it elegantly shifts. It goes from, I walk for my son, to I walk to carry him, and eventually, I walk to finish what he started. The flame itself is exactly the same, but the relationship, that has moved from being ahead of him to being deep within him. This kind of deep adaptability is exactly how meaning survives our absolute darkest moments.
And hey, this isn't just abstract theory. This lines up perfectly with Viktor Frankl's profound observations when he was in Auschwitz. He saw firsthand that survival wasn't random. It required a daily, active regeneration of purpose. The prisoners who survived were the ones who could actively point at a future task or a loved one. They weren't just passively holding on to some stored memory. They engaged in a daily, mortal act of choosing a why. Basically, your purpose isn't something you lost in the past. It's something you have to actively wake up and choose to do today.
Okay, Part 3. Making room to meet. The architecture of withdrawal. So, if meaning is a doing, how on earth do we do connection with other people?
Have you ever tried to comfort a friend by just talking way too much? Filling the air with advice? It rarely works. And this brings us to a really profound concept, illustrated by the parable of the potter. A master potter tells his student that a bowl isn't actually made of clay. The bowl is the room you pull the clay back from. The water lives in the empty space. In mysticism, there's a word for this: timsum. It's this incredible idea that creation and connection actually require a deliberate contraction. You quite literally have to withdraw yourself to make space for someone else.
We see this beautifully applied by that exact same student years later. She's working at a shelter, and a man comes in grieving because he had to spend his birthday completely alone. Her very first impulse was to fill the silence, right? To give advice, to fix his problems. But then, she remembered the potter's wheel. She pulled her hands back, she performed an active withdrawal, and into that empty space, she simply witnessed him. She essentially said, "I see you. Today counted." Because she didn't try to annex his pain with her own agenda, a true, genuine human meeting finally happened in the hollow space she's so bravely left open.
Part 4. The palimpsest self. Here we're balancing professional legibility with human depth. So how exactly do we apply this tension of pulling back to our everyday careers? Well, sociologist Irving Goffman points out that we all have a performed self. You know the one, that legible, safe mask that easily speaks the language of boards and strategic plans. And look, we need this scaffolding to build institutional trust. But the cost of this extreme legibility is losing our palimpsest self. If you don't know, a palimpsest is an ancient parchment that's been written over multiple times, where older, messy inscriptions still bleed through the new ink. It represents a raw, permeable, beautifully disrupted human depth.
And here's the big trap. Institutions are always going to reward you for being a clean, legible symbol. But over time, that symbol can entirely eclipse your actual humanity. To be what we might call a witness architect, you really have to practice suspicious fluency. What I mean is, when the corporate jargon starts coming a little too easily to your lips, you have to intentionally pause. You've got to let those older, messy, human inscriptions, like the memory of that grieving man in the shelter, bleed right through your polished professional surface. Part 5. Rekeeping the Vow. Mortality as an Invitation. Let's wrap up by looking at how mortality itself is actually the ultimate driver of this entire framework. Consider the parable of the 4 minutes. There's a man sitting at a river during golden hour, and he is just furious because the beautiful light is leaving. He aggressively demands to know how to hold on to it, but the teacher tells him this incredible truth. The looking is the having. Think about it. If you could freeze and own the river, you'd eventually stop paying attention to it entirely. The only reason you are awake and looking with your whole heart right now is precisely because the light is leaving. Mortality isn't some glitch in the system. It is the absolute condition that makes love and attention possible in the first place. This flips our standard metaphor totally on its head. We usually assume that seeking means we're empty and having means we're full. But what if a fullness, a holding, actually must be spent? A river throwing back bright light doesn't lack light. It's practically overflowing with it. Reaching out to others doesn't mean you are empty or broken. It means you are an overflowing river actively seeking a shore. Both the seeking and the having, they're both made of gold. So, because we've learned today that memory, purpose, and connection are things we do rather than things we just passively have, your meaning is entirely dependent on your actions today. The clay is waiting, the light is leaving, and the true book is ready to be written. I want to leave you with this. Look at your life today. What space will you bravely leave empty so that a true meeting can finally happen?